You're not going to believe this one. Imagine a billionaire CEO, young, handsome, and practically swimming in luxury, who had every opportunity to choose from the most glamorous, elite women money could attract. We're talking about fashion influencers, tech heiresses, even international models lining up just for a shot to be by his side. But guess what? He rejected every single one of them.
Cold.
Without a second thought. That's right. While the world assumed he'd end up with someone as rich and high-profile as he was, his heart made a wildly unexpected turn. Because the person who caught his eye, who shook his entire world, was someone nobody saw coming. She didn't wear designer heels or sip overpriced lattes at rooftop lounges.
No.
She delivered takeout on an old bike, with windblown hair and secondhand shoes, chasing tips just to keep her phone on. And somehow, she changed everything. Now, I know what you're thinking. How does a delivery girl even end up in the same universe as a CEO who could buy an island for breakfast? Trust me, that's exactly what we're about to unpack. Stick with me here. Because by the end of this story, you're going to get the answer you came for. The real reason he walked away from wealth and walked straight into the arms of a woman who had nothing except something no money could buy. And no, this isn't just some fairy tale fantasy.
It's raw.
It's real. It's got twists you won't see coming. I'm not here to waste your time. You clicked on this video for a reason because deep down you wanted to know why. Why would a man who has everything choose someone with nothing? What did she have that no rich woman ever could? And if you stick with me to the end, not only will you understand that, but you'll also see how one simple act, a moment of human kindness, can change a life forever. Let's get personal for a second. Because if you're watching this, maybe you've felt invisible, like success and love are for people with connections, status, money. Or maybe you've been judged by what you don't have. Maybe you've been the one watching others get chosen over you, wondering what you're missing. This story? It's for you. Because what happened between this CEO and that delivery girl? It shattered every rule society tries to feed us about who's worthy and who's not. It's proof that love doesn't read bank statements. And when destiny decides to rewrite your story, it doesn't care what your credit score looks like. So here's what you're in for. Over the next few minutes, I'm taking you deep into the life of Colton Reeves. Yeah, that Colton. The tech genius turned multimillionaire before 30. He built one of the biggest software empires in Silicon Valley, turned down offers from Google, and owns more property than he can personally visit. You've seen his face on magazine covers. You've probably scrolled past a reel or two about his insane net worth. But what they don't show you is what happened behind the headlines. They don't talk about the women he quietly dismissed, women with last names that opened doors at the White House. They certainly don't talk about the moment everything changed. One stormy night, one lukewarm delivery, and one girl who wasn't supposed to matter. But she did. Her name was Tessa. No viral profile. No powerful family name. Just a girl barely scraping by in a city that doesn't wait for anyone. The kind of girl you walk past without looking twice. Except Colton did look. And what he saw, it shook him. Not just attraction, not just curiosity, something deeper. Something he didn't even know he was missing. And here's where the real mystery kicks in, because the very night he met her, he made a decision that shocked even his closest advisors. He canceled an engagement that was supposed to merge two multi-billion-dollar empires.
Think about that.
One poor girl with a delivery bag somehow meant more to him than everything he'd built.
Why?
What did she do? Was it something she said, or something she didn't? This is where it gets complicated, because while everyone thought he was out of his mind, walking away from power and legacy, Colton was doing something most of us are too afraid to do. He was following something real, something rare. But that doesn't mean it was easy. If you think their story was all soft music and candlelight, think again. What came next was brutal, media storms, betrayal, jealousy, and secrets that nearly ripped them apart. Because here's the truth. When the rich fall for the broke, the world doesn't clap. It claws.
And Tessa?
She was about to face the kind of spotlight she never asked for, and the kind of pressure that could crush someone who's only ever known survival. Now, before we dive into that storm, I want you to really feel what's at stake. This isn't just a story about romance. It's about perception. It's about breaking out of the box the world tries to shove you in. And most of all, it's about the insane things we're willing to risk for something that feels real. Colton risked his empire. Tessa risked her peace. And together, they stepped into a fire that would either forge something unbreakable or burn them both to ash. So, if you're here to find out why the rich CEO rejected the world's most desired women and how a delivery girl with nothing but heart and hustle made him question everything, keep watching. Because just when it seems like the pieces are falling into place, something happens. Something no one expected. And when it does, the whole story flips. Before we get into the part that changed everything, let's go back just a little. Because to truly understand why Colton Reeves turned his back on wealth and the carefully calculated relationships built around it, you have to know where he came from and what was quietly haunting him all along. Born into a world of polished floors, luxury boarding schools, and private jet vacations, Colton wasn't just rich, he was legacy rich. His father, Gregory Reeves, was one of the early pioneers of Silicon Valley. A man whose handshake alone could move millions. Growing up, Colton was always taught that love came second, maybe even third, after power and reputation. His future wasn't just planned, it was engineered. He was expected to marry someone who came from the same circle, someone who could carry the Reeves name forward without a scandal. So when he turned down a high-profile engagement to Rachel Wentworth, the heiress to a billion-dollar fashion empire, it sent shockwaves through the elite world. The media spun 1,000 reasons, irreconcilable differences, work stress, maybe even a secret mistress. But no one got close to the truth. Not yet. And while the headlines roared, Colton said nothing. He stayed off podcasts, refused interviews, and let the press keep guessing. But what he didn't tell anyone was that it all started one night when he was holed up in his penthouse after canceling yet another board meeting. Alone, tired, and emotionally numb. He didn't want another wine-tasting gala or a 4-course dinner. He wanted something simple, something real. So he pulled up a food delivery app, something his assistant usually handled, and placed an order for a basic burger and fries. No gold flakes, no truffle oil. Just comfort. And when the buzzer rang 40 minutes later, he opened the door himself, something he hadn't done in years. That's when he saw her. Rain-soaked hoodie, plastic bag in hand, a smile that didn't look forced. She looked exhausted, but her eyes, there was something alive in them. Like she hadn't given up, even though life clearly hadn't been kind to her. Tessa Daniels wasn't supposed to be in that building. The restaurant had rerouted her delivery because the original driver had gotten sick. She was filling in extra shifts just to cover her overdue rent. When she saw the man in the penthouse doorway, she didn't recognize him. Not immediately. To her, he was just another customer. But unlike the usual crowd, he didn't scoff at her wet jacket or the grease-stained paper bag. He actually said thank you like he meant it. She left that night thinking nothing of it. But Colton? He couldn't stop thinking about her. That moment, so ordinary on the surface, planted something in his mind he hadn't felt in years. Curiosity. A pull toward someone who wasn't trying to impress him. No curated image. No perfect smile for the tabloids. Just raw, unfiltered existence. In the days that followed, he ordered from that same place more than once, hoping, subconsciously maybe, that she'd show up again. And then she did. But this time, she was in a rush, out of breath, her bike nearly stolen from outside. Colton invited her in, just for a moment. Said it was unsafe out there. Tessa hesitated, then stepped inside. She didn't sit on his custom Italian couch or marvel at the art pieces that collectors begged for. Instead, she asked where the nearest restroom was because she'd been riding nonstop for 6 hours. And again, something inside Colton stirred. This girl wasn't impressed by wealth. She barely even noticed it. And when they talked, it wasn't about investments, politics, or digital currency trends.
It was about life.
About how her younger brother had been kicked out of school for not affording the tech fees. About how she sometimes worked 3 gigs just to stay ahead of the late fees. She wasn't bitter, just honest. But as their interactions grew, so did the consequences. Colton's assistant started asking questions. Why was he skipping dinners with high-level investors? Why had he backed out of a gala that could have secured another international contract? Behind closed doors, some on his board began to suspect he was unraveling, losing his edge. And Rachel? She wasn't gone quietly. In fact, the media began spotting her with a new man, another CEO, and someone publicly making digs at Colton's erratic behavior. Rumors spiraled. Was Colton losing it? Was he battling depression? Had the pressure of being the youngest tech mogul finally cracked him? No one knew that what was actually happening was far more dangerous for the industry, for his legacy, and for the illusions powerful people work so hard to keep intact. Because the moment Colton began to feel something real, he became a threat. Not to himself, but to the system that relies on control, on alliances made through money, not love. And Tessa? She had no idea the target slowly forming on her back. The first threat came in a voicemail she never expected. A distorted voice, warning her to stay in her lane. Then came the mysterious job rejections, even at places she'd previously worked. She brushed it off at first. But then her brother's college application was flagged for academic inconsistencies that didn't exist. Colton tried to help. Quietly, carefully. But the more involved he got, the more enemies he created in his own circle. And that's when one of his closest friends, an investor named Alec, pulled him aside and said something that shook him. They're watching her, Colton. They think you've gone rogue. And if you keep seeing her, they'll make her disappear. Now, before you jump to conclusions, no, this isn't some underground conspiracy or billionaire mafia thriller. But the truth is, powerful people don't like losing control. And Tessa represented everything they couldn't buy, manage, or predict. She was chaos to their structure. So while Colton and Tessa's connection grew, so did the pressure to end it. Offers came.
Bribes.
Even a quiet deal from a global media agency promising to bury a years-old family scandal if he just let her go. But Colton wasn't playing their game anymore. The more they pushed, the closer he clung to her. And the more he clung, the more danger she was in. Tessa, however, wasn't naive. She knew something was off. The sudden influx of fake social media accounts spreading rumors. The journalist that showed up outside her building asking if she was pregnant with the CEO's baby. And then one night, her bike was stolen and her apartment broken into. Nothing was taken. Nothing valuable anyway. But her childhood photo albums were slashed, her brother's school books ripped. It wasn't robbery. It was a message. A cruel reminder that she wasn't welcome in the world she'd stumbled into. She tried to confront Colton, but he was already spiraling, torn between protecting her and exposing the people trying to destroy her. And right when it felt like things couldn't get worse, when the tension was peaking and the entire city felt like it was holding its breath, something happened. Something so big, so unexpected, that it would change the trajectory of everything. But what was it? Why did Colton go completely silent after that night? And where did Tessa disappear to in the days that followed? You'll find out, but not just yet. Because the real story, the truth that no one saw coming, is just beginning. And trust me, what comes next will make you question everything you thought you knew about love, loyalty, and the price of choosing freedom over fame. Keep watching, you don't want to miss what's coming. The silence that followed wasn't the kind you get after an argument or a misunderstanding, it was the kind that screams. Colton vanished from public view. His phone went dead, his social media accounts went dark, and even his company issued a vague statement about him taking an extended private leave. But those close to him knew better. Something had happened. Something that made the most visible tech CEO in America retreat from the world he once dominated. Meanwhile, Tessa found herself caught in a whirlwind of chaos. The break-in had shaken her, but what really unnerved her was the letter slipped under her door the next day. No envelope. No name. Just one line scribbled in ink that looked smeared, rushed. He doesn't know yet. But he will soon. You need to leave before he does. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the message was chilling. Was it a warning? A threat? Or something more sinister? Something meant to confuse her into walking away just when she needed to hold on? What neither of them knew was that the truth, the real truth, was already unraveling behind the scenes. Colton had discovered something buried deep in the financial archives of his family foundation. A series of anonymous shell donations to offshore accounts that linked back to lobbying firms he never remembered authorizing. At first, he thought it was internal fraud. But as he dug deeper, following the money trails like digital breadcrumbs, he found something worse. Tessa's name. Not her full name, but just enough to know it wasn't a coincidence. Someone had used his foundation, his legacy, to quietly destroy the life of the one person he cared about. They weren't just trying to push her away. They were trying to frame her. And once the press got wind of it, she'd be branded a gold digger, a scam artist, maybe even a criminal. Colton had been silent because he was trying to protect her, not from the world, but from his world. A place where power wasn't used to build, but to erase. Back in her neighborhood, Tessa could feel the shift. Friends stopped calling. Neighbors she used to share groceries with avoided her eyes. She overheard whispers at the corner store, saw posts on local Facebook groups questioning her involvement with a billionaire. Then came the fire, small but deliberate. Her brother's car, the one he'd saved for, was torched in the early morning hours. No suspects. No leads. Just a burnt-out shell of hope left smoldering in their driveway. That was the moment she knew she couldn't pretend this was normal. That being in Colton's orbit came with a price she hadn't agreed to pay. She wanted to call him. Wanted to scream, cry, ask him why. But all she got was his voicemail, the same one that hadn't changed in weeks. "Hey, this is Colton. Leave a message." And so she did. Her voice cracked. She told him she was scared. Told him she missed him. Told him that none of this felt real anymore. What she didn't know was that her voicemail was being played by someone else entirely. A former board member, Elena Drayton, had been watching everything unfold from the shadows. She was once Colton's mentor, a woman whose influence helped shape the Reeves empire before being quietly ousted in a hostile boardroom move. Most assumed she had retired and moved abroad, but in truth, she'd been pulling strings behind the scenes for years. It was Elena who had warned Colton's inner circle that love could become a liability. It was Elena who hired the PR firm that painted Tessa as a distraction. But Elena had a secret of her own, one tied not just to Colton, but to his mother's mysterious death, which had always been labeled an accident. Colton never knew the full story, but Elena did. And now, seeing how far he was willing to go for a broke delivery girl, she realized something terrifying. He might be the one person capable of exposing the truth. And if he did, her entire empire, built quietly behind his, would crumble. Then came the twist no one saw coming. Colton resurfaced, not in New York, not at a press conference, but in a leaked video that exploded across YouTube, Reddit, and trending searches within hours. The footage was grainy, filmed on a hidden phone in what looked like a basement server room. But the voice was unmistakably his. "They've been lying to all of us. Not just about her. About everything." The video showed screenshots of internal documents, blurred faces of executives, and charts that hinted at systemic fraud dating back years. It wasn't just about him and Tessa anymore. It was about whistleblowing on an entire corporate empire, and doing it with nothing left to lose. The comment section was on fire. Half the viewers thought it was a deepfake. The other half hailed him as a modern-day Robin Hood. But for Tessa, it was the final straw. She packed what little she had and left the city, her brother in tow, vanishing without a trace. Except someone was following her. A car. Black. Unmarked. Always parked a little too close. She'd noticed it days earlier, but now it was obvious. Whoever they weren't reporters. They never approached. Never asked questions. Just watched. She didn't tell her brother. He was already shaken enough. But the fear was building. Because she knew that whatever Colton had uncovered in that server room wasn't just about his company. It was about her. And if he had enemies, then so did she. And in a game this big, people like her didn't usually get second chances. But here's the part that will really twist your stomach. Colton knew she was in danger. He had proof. Security footage, audio recordings, even emails forwarded by an anonymous insider. But before he could reach her, he was gone again. vanished into a safe house under a new name, reportedly with someone on the inside helping him. No one knew where. No one even knew if he was alive. The media was spinning wild theories. Twitter was melting down. Conspiracy channels on YouTube were breaking 1,000 views a minute. But Tessa? She was alone. More alone than she'd ever been. And then she found the USB drive. It was taped under the seat of the bike that had been stolen and mysteriously returned days later. Inside it? A video message from Colton. His voice shaky, his eyes red. If you're watching this, it means they're close. You need to leave the city.
Now.
Go to the cabin. You remember the map I gave you. Don't trust anyone. Especially not the people who say they're helping. And just like that, the story took a turn none of us could have predicted. Because if Colton is on the run, and Tessa's being hunted, not just by corporate elites, but by those with something much deeper to hide, then what happens next won't just be about love. It will be about survival. About exposing a secret so dark, it was never meant to come to light. And the question you have to ask yourself now is this. Who's really in control here? The billionaire who fell in love with a broke delivery girl? Or the invisible powers that will do anything to stop them? The night air around the old cabin was sharp, laced with pine, and the faint smell of smoke from the wood stove burning inside. Tessa had made it, barely. The roads had iced over faster than expected, and the GPS went dark an hour out from the final turn, but she'd remembered the landmarks Colton once described to her like a lullaby. The fork in the road with the fallen mailbox, the crooked tree that looked like it was frozen mid-dance, and the rusted road sign half swallowed by the forest. The cabin itself was worn, aged, almost invisible in the woods, like it had been waiting in silence for her return. Inside, everything was just as he had left it. Old photos nailed to the wood-paneled walls, a dusty chessboard by the fire, and a single envelope resting on the table with her name scrawled across it in his handwriting. Her heart pounded as she opened it, finding not just a letter but a map, a burner phone, and a code that looked like gibberish, until she remembered it was their old diner order total, back from when she first met him as just another late-night customer. Colton had planned this. Every inch of it. He'd anticipated their enemies, the media, the betrayal, and he knew that in the end, she'd be the one to finish what he started. At the same time, miles away under the slick lights of a packed tech summit in Los Angeles, Elena Drayton stood on stage, poised to announce a groundbreaking merger between her conglomerate and Reeves Industries, which she now controlled. The press had been prepped, the questions rehearsed, and the shareholders silenced with payouts that buried their doubts. But as the cameras clicked and she leaned in to deliver her opening words, the giant screen behind her flickered. For a brief second, it went black, then glitched, then suddenly displayed the unmistakable image of Colton Reeves, not live, but pre-recorded, with the kind of calm clarity that only someone with nothing left to lose could carry. If you're seeing this, his voice began, it means the truth couldn't be buried any deeper. You deserve to know what's really been happening behind the walls of the empire I built, and who is really pulling the strings. What followed was a data dump so massive, so detailed, that it stunned the crowd into absolute silence. Names, faces, documents, voice memos, even footage of covert board meetings where decisions were made to destroy lives in exchange for quarterly profits. But what struck hardest was the revelation that Elena had not only orchestrated Tessa's public takedown, she had fabricated the evidence that linked her to corporate theft, hacked her accounts, and then leaked the fake story to tabloids hungry for another viral scandal. Worse still, the death of Colton's mother, long accepted as a tragic accident, was revealed to be a planned elimination to cement Elena's control of the company after she had refused to sign off on a merger with one of Elena's shell firms. Colton had spent years unaware, conditioned by those around him to stay out of the financial shadows of his own business. But Tessa, unknowingly, had triggered everything, because in trying to protect her, he had uncovered the rot beneath everything his family had stood for. As the video played across global news streams, YouTube live chats, and every social platform trending that night, Elena froze. For the first time, her composure cracked. She turned toward her aides, but there was no help. Security had been infiltrated. Colton's team, now whistleblowers protected by legal shields and backed by a coalition of investigative journalists, had planned this moment down to the second. The crowd erupted. Some screamed. Some cried. Most just watched in stunned disbelief. And while the world's attention was glued to the fall of a titan, Tessa activated the final piece of the plan from the cabin, a signal routed through a secure network that sent all remaining files directly to federal investigators, along with a final message from her. He wanted the truth. I want justice. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was seismic. Elena was arrested under charges of conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction of justice. Ree's Industries stock tanked before slowly stabilizing under a new, transparent leadership. Tessa, once branded a gold digger and worse, was publicly exonerated when the evidence proved she had no part in the alleged crimes and, in fact, had been targeted for destruction by a jealous power structure threatened by the influence she unknowingly had over Colton. In a surprise turn that shocked even the most skeptical observers, Tessa was offered a position on the foundation board, this time with a clear mission: to rebuild it into something that actually served the people it claimed to help. But just when it seemed everything had been laid to rest, the unexpected twist came. A private message surfaced on a live-streamed podcast that had been dissecting the story, claiming Colton Reeves had faked not just his disappearance, but his death. Yes, the man the world thought had gone into hiding or worse was rumored to be living under an alias, quietly working with international regulators on a massive global corruption case. No one could confirm it, and no one could disprove it either. And then, one night, back at the same diner where their story began, the waitress handed Tessa a cup of coffee with a note tucked under it. The handwriting was familiar. It read, "The world's quieter when you stop listening to the noise. But I'm always with you, even if they can't see me."
See.
The moment was fleeting, but the impact was permanent. Because sometimes, the most powerful love stories aren't the ones that end in fairy tales. They're the ones that burn through lies, expose the ugliest truths, and survive even when the world tries to bury them. And for every viewer who made it to this point, here's what you need to take away. Don't believe every headline. Don't trust every empire, and never underestimate the strength of someone who's been broken but still chooses to stand. This wasn't just a story about a rich CEO and a broke delivery girl. It was a story about waking up, about fighting back, and about how love, when it's real, doesn't just survive the fire. It becomes the spark that burns everything false to the ground. And that is how the world found out what happens when the heart of a billionaire beats not for power, but for truth.